It's Wednesday at the Capitol, and that means only one thing, actually several things, but it's also Key West Day here in the Capitol, which is one of my favorite days of the entire year because the food is absolutely fantastic. And then you go out there and you get conch and you get shrimp and you get lobster sometimes, and you get these great, what is it, key lime pie on a stick with chocolate on it. And people just go absolutely mad for that stuff.
Anything with chocolate, I'm in.
Yeah, and well, you have to skip the meat stuff, right?
Yeah. There's no meat in chocolate. It's like
It depends on how you make it. You could use lard, as a way to make it thicker. Anyways, all right, we are again at the Capitol and talking to one of our favorite people in Tallahassee, who's not at the Capitol right now because her foot is out of operation for a while. Dara Cam.
Hey guys.
Yeah. Before that, are we in the rotation, Gary?
Oh, I should mention that. Okay, hold on a second. Ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into the rotation. We are at 401 North Monroe Street in Tallahassee, named after the Monroe Doctrine, I believe, which says, leave us alone, we're just all by ourselves. And we are trying to do whatever we can to make certain that we get a chance to educate the legislators to know what bills are out there that are good, what bills are out there that they should need to knock down, and what bills we've written and need to get in. And we've actually gotten 2 bills now filed this week for the Employee Protection Act with Senator Polsky, and I believe she has somebody else set up for the House. I thought it was Agnes Nixon, but I'm not certain. And that's about to come up. And of course, all the other bills we have that are moving forward very nicely. But we have a lot. It's funny, when I was working in this business now for Tallahassee, trying to make this program work, I figured 7 years later, 8 years later, we'd be done by now. And all we have to do is just tweak it a little bit to make it a little bit better. But we're still going backwards and trying to fix the glitches of 2017. Mm-hmm. And somebody who's been looking at this from all sides from the very beginning is our guest today, Dara Cam, who's been on the show before and again is now coming to you live from her house in a chair with wheels on it.
Right. I fractured my tibia about 7 weeks ago, and I've got no weight bearing for 12 weeks. And so I'm coming at you from I live in the Lafayette Park neighborhood in Tallahassee, about 5 minutes from the Capitol. So I'm coming at you from the Lafayette Park Rehabilitation Center.
I was surprised coming up here in Tallahassee this year. You have so many dispensaries in this town. Now, granted, you've got 2 colleges. You got 2 colleges, one on each side of the street there, basically on Pensacola Drive. But they are so stocked with dispensaries that they almost have as many as they have Applebee's and Starbucks.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And they're, you would think that we've reached the saturation point in Tallahassee, but I don't know. We don't get to see any of those receipts, so we don't have any idea of how much business they're doing, but they keep opening.
Well, Tallahassee, for people who don't know, is up here in the Panhandle for a reason. The farther away you are from all the population centers of Florida, the more things can go on that people don't know about. That's probably one of the reasons they never moved it to Orlando. Isn't that about right?
No, I don't know if your listeners are interested in this, but a little history lesson here. Tallahassee, the story is that Tallahassee became the capital of Florida because the population centers were at the time in the St. Augustine, Jacksonville area and the Pensacola area. And that a guy got on his horse in each of those places. And when they met in the middle, they decided that would be the capital. And Tallahassee that's it.
So Tallahassee, the place where the horses meet.
It's a little lore for you there. I don't know how much truth there is in it, but hey, you're in the capital. Truth is not we don't care about truthiness all necessarily.
Well, one of the truths is the fact that we still don't have an expanded program here with a free market, with only 22 licenses, of which approximately 17 are active at this point in time. And they're still holding up the licenses, including the very one license they set aside for minorities, which in most places they would consider that tokenism. In Florida, they consider it positive movement, but it really hasn't moved yet. We haven't even given that license out, and you have an idea as to why. You want to talk to us about that?
Well, one of the reasons they haven't advanced with the license for it's a black farmer. The license was earmarked. I'm sure your listeners are very sophisticated, your viewers and listeners. So I'm sure they know all this, but I'll just give a little sketch out what happened, how we got here. The legislature passed a bill in 2017 back in 2015, anticipating that marijuana would be legal, medical marijuana would be authorized, was the roots of the current program. And you had to be a nurseryman in Florida for 30 years in order to qualify for a license to grow low THC cannabis at the time.
And not too many minorities actually met that bar, did they?
No black farmers in Florida qualified because of lending discrimination by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So they came back when they started the program, when they laid out the framework for the program as it exists today in 2017. They set aside one license for a black farmer who had participated in class action litigation against the federal government over that discrimination. And the reason that I gave a little bit of detail about what the license, the specifications of that license, is because that's also played into why it hasn't been awarded yet, or it hasn't been actually finalized yet. So the problem is that the law said you had to be a participant in this litigation and have done business in Florida for at least 5 years. So the state received 12 applications for this license last year. And I would say that they announced in November their decision to award it to Terry Gwynn from Ocala, I think. Ocala, am I right? No, Suwannee County. Yeah, and everybody else who lost challenged. But the problem is now the department is deciding whether or not any of these people, or many of them, were even eligible at all to participate, to apply for the license. So that process is slow. It is dragging out. The department has informal hearings on these losing applicants' petitions for, fighting their denial of the license, set up in March and April. So those informals won't last until, won't take place for a couple more months yet. And meanwhile, there will be litigation over in the First District Court of Appeal. The gentleman who scored the highest. Is this too boring? Do you want me to keep going?
No. Like we have a lot of geeks in the audience, and they are aware that tomfoolery.
It sounds like we're just getting the juicy part.
Yeah, I mean, we have to get to the fuckery.
Yeah, there's a lot of juiciness. Let's put it that way. So anyway, so Moton
you can say fuckery.
Oh, good, because I say it on my podcast. So yes, there's a lot of cluster fuckery going on. So Moton Hopkins, a 90-year-old man, applied, and he actually got the highest score from the state's evaluators. And lo and behold, guess what? He passed away before they announced their intent to award the license to an applicant. So his estate and his heirs are suing, and they just got shot down at the Florida Division of Administrative Hearings. A judge sided with the state and said, basically, if you're dead, you're dead. You can't qualify. And they are going to appeal that to the First District Court of Appeal here in Tallahassee. And, you know, they might have a better chance there. They might have a chance there. I'm not sure that I don't know what the court will do. My prediction is the court will stick with the department's decision, and eventually Terry Gwynn will get this license. And, you know, how long it will take, I don't know, because they are going to start accepting applications. This is where it gets a little tricky. They're going to start accepting applications for the 22 licenses. We can talk about, there's going to, under the law, the department was required to issue new licenses as the number of patients increases. We're now at a point where we need 22 more licenses, which would double the size of the industry, as you said. We have 22 licensed operators. Really, not all of them are actually functioning. But
now the OMU did state they were not going to give out any of those 22 licenses until the Pigford license had been established and completed. Is that correct?
Well, I thought they wouldn't start with the process until the Pigford license has been completed. I don't believe that they will be giving out those new licenses because, again, that's the application window is just April. The application window last year was in March. They gave the award, they announced the intent to award the license in November. So that's a process that takes several months. And, you know, I'm thinking that the black farmer litigation will be wrapped up by then, because here's the kind of catch. If you are a class participant in that litigation and you paid the $160,000 application fee last year for that one license, you don't have to pay it again to apply in this next round of 22. So how will they?
Because we actually had the highest application fee in the country at $60,000, and they doubled it for the minority license.
And they changed the renewal fee now is 1.3 million to renew. That's annual. So ours was 60,000 every 2 years. And now it will be 1.3 million every 2 years. So anyway, it's very tricky because we don't know what's going to be resolved, and they're called Pigford cases. In those challenges before it's time to apply for the next round. So are they going to have to fork out another 160,000? I don't think, in my view, based on what I've seen and read all the applications, I think there's probably only 2 or 3 of the Pigford applicants that the state will consider were really eligible to apply for that license. So we'll have to wait.
Those two were Gwynn and Hopkins. Now, how could they have
There's
not
one
have
more.
known?
There's one more that's still in the running.
That would be the Florida tree growers with
No.
the Black Mule.
McGriff.
Okay.
My prediction is that McGriff is going to end up with a license by hook or by crook. And
was there a large gap between the scores for Montone's application and Gwynn's application?
I think there's going to be 2 licenses coming out of the black farmer process. I think it's going to be McGriff and Gwynn. Just going out on a limb here.
Now, the Gwynn group can debate me on this, but it's my understanding they already have a $35 million sale set up as soon as they actually get their license. So they can.
Well, they better jump on it. I mean, I think they better jump on it before they unleash that next round of licenses, because when they do, the value of those licenses which has been, I mean, some of them have traded for like 85 million, I think was the highest amount. And that's not cash.
217 million.
That's not cash though. How much?
Now it's stock. 217 million when the Green Thumb Industries, I guess, picked up what was left of one plant and turned it into Sunnyside. It was 217 million. They gave it to Brady Cobb.
That seems like more than what I was aware of. All right. Well, then they were selling for a shit ton more money than they're going to be selling for after we have twice as many operators as we have right now. And they're only going to be paper licenses, right, Gary? What
just paper licenses because we don't have any infrastructure on those.
Exactly.
At this point in time. Now, what gets me is that how do they not know that if you have a setup where you have to be a farmer in Florida and had to be part of this pig process, which was in the early 1990s. These people were already in their 40s and 50s when they were applying to be a member of that class action suit. That in the 2020s, these people wouldn't be in their 80s and 90s and not totally able to work the next 20 years. Let's put it that way.
You know, I can't tell you, I would never dream of trying to explain why the legislature does what they do. And sometimes I can piece it together, but in this one, I think they were really trying, the goal was, Gary, as you know, to help farmers who had been discriminated, had faced discrimination while they were farming, because it turned out they were discriminated against when the state started its medical program, right? So they were trying to give them a leg up in the industry, and I think that they ended up writing the statute in such a way that it really foreclosed a lot of Black farmers and their families from being able to compete for a license.
So in essence, they created a situation where they were going to give away one license, make one minority millionaire out of the rest of the license holders, and basically what happened was even that all they have out right now is one memorandum of understanding to give the license to Gwynn once this process is completed, if it ever gets completed. And then there's also a indigenous person in the Panhandle who I think is still fighting the fact that they did not include indigenous people in minority licenses.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that was, Lori, but farming in Florida, I've read some of the stories of the kinds of discrimination that minority, African Americans and indigenous people face, and it's pretty horrific. I mean, it was pretty gross.
Yeah, I believe that the minority farmers of Florida have lost as much as 80% of their land over the last 40 years, having to sell it away or give it away just to make ends meet. Never got any way of getting back on their feet. And this was one thing they could have done to have gotten back on their feet.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem with these applicants for the license was they had to prove that they had been doing business in Florida for at least 5 years, and that was problematic because there was one woman, it was 90-year-old woman, Leola Robinson, who had a farm. Their family lost the farm. A lot of these families lost their farms because of a serious drought that was really the precursor to this litigation. And then she's been, they get older, they're not actively farming, they're using the property as a tree farm. So she had an agricultural exemption on her property and was selling timber, and that was not deemed by the state as having conducted business. There is certain language that I don't have in front of me, but it didn't meet the specifications for how you've conducted business in the state. So there were a couple of them that got turned down because they couldn't show that they've been doing business, even though they've been doing business in some way. So it's really kind of a tragic story, the whole black farmer, Pigford, medical marijuana. They're already coming in, the state, they lawmakers added this provision into the law in 2017. They're coming in now, by the time they get up and running, 6 years after a robust, thriving branded market. It's going to take a hell of a lot to be able to compete against True Leave and Certera and Sunnyside and Move, that have a lot of brand loyalty. They've got dispensaries all up and down here, there, and everywhere. So forget about trying to get some retail locations, which is also a struggle for newcomers. And then you're going to have, at the same time as the black farmer is going to be setting up shop, you're going very quickly after that, you'll have 22 other newcomers. So it's going to be a challenge.
And those 22 other comers, they're going to have to come with at least $30 to $40 million to get set up a virtual license, and have to catch up years of other folks already building brand loyalty, etc.
Yeah,
So
and
what is the
I
hope for
think the dispensary locations, I don't think you can really overstate the significance of that, because real estate in Florida has gone crazy. Maybe that's being tapering off a little now, but that just finding locations where you can do business is going to pose a challenge, I think, for the newcomers.
So basically, you have to have some land, and you have to have a lot of money to be able to start your business from scratch with this crazy vertical model, where you have, if you're going to sell a product, you actually have to. Oh, it's kind of like Nabisco saying they have to grow their own flour to sell crackers. They can only sell their crackers in a Nabisco kiosk that they own in a market.
Yeah, it's supposed to, the goal of that was to minimize diversion. I'm not sure why that would, I guess if it's changing fewer hands, if there are fewer hands handling it, that reduces the risk for diversion. But it made it so that the products are so expensive that it's really shut a lot of potential patients, I think, out of the program, right? Don't you? It's
Absolutely.
very expensive.
Yeah. If you want to be a millionaire, first thing you got to do is be a millionaire.
Right.
It's
But
simply,
of course, these licenses now are, the 22 new licenses. The other thing we need to mention is there's what seems to be a viable constitutional amendment that would authorize adult use, that True Leave is funding. I forget how much money. You're good with numbers. How much money have they dumped into that so far? 20 million,
right
30
now, I
million?
think it's about 15 million. They
Okay.
had it over 5.5. I think it's 20.5 now.
Okay.
And they've got
Okay. So
270,000 signatures.
yes, they have reached the trigger for Supreme Court review of the language on the amendment. Now we
Yeah, and so far,
know
every single ballot initiative so far has not made it past the Supreme Court review, except for
that's
one
right.
time that, actually, no, none of them have made it through completely. None of them.
Since the John Morgan's, well, you're right. So even that one didn't get through at the first pass.
Right.
John Morgan's amendment authorizing medical use. So yeah, am I skeptical about the Supreme Court? Yes. Did they look very carefully? The authors of the amendment say they looked very carefully at the previous admonitions from the court on the amendments they rejected and tried to use that as guidance. But this court I guess I can dare to say this. They probably aren't watching the rotation, but this
Oh,
court
you'd be surprised.
might find a way. Well, let's just look at what they did with Floraground. I mean,
Yep.
that was Joe Redner's challenge, and that hung out there for a long time. He challenged the vertical integration, the constitutionality of the state's system, the state scheme. And the Supreme Court had to take very unusual step of hearing two sets of oral arguments in that case. And they ended up upholding the statute, but they had to go through a lot of gymnastics to get to that point. And so the point I'm making is that I think that this is a court that has shown that it's not afraid to use some creativity to arrive at the conclusion at the decision that would be embraced by the state's leaders. That was
Well,
pretty PC.
yeah. Well, let's try to leave this on a positive note. Do you have one? Because I don't.
I think that when they do get up and running, I think obviously if it makes it past the Supreme Court, it will pass. I mean, I really think that it will pass. And everybody that I talk to say it's just a question of when, not if, Florida will authorize adult use. I think
They have to
that
get
there
over
is,
a million. They have to get a million registered voters, approximately, to sign this petition. And out of the 22 million, I think we have approximately 10 million registered voters in the state of Florida. So that's 1/10 of the registered voters in Florida. And the question is, what is the saturation point of those who'd be willing to sign the petition, at least, or people who they can have access to sign that petition and get it
well,
done?
but you also have the legislature in session right now that might be considering making it harder again for amendments to get on the ballot. I don't think that would be in effect for 2024. I'm not sure. Already we require 60%. And
Yeah.
so if you have to get 2/3, 66.7%, I mean, that's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift to get constitutional amendments passed. And they've made a bunch of changes to the initiative process. It's made it very, very expensive. It costs at least $50 million to get on the ballot. And, so we'll see what happens. But I do, in terms of what's some rose colored glasses here for patients, just for patients, I do think that once these 22 licenses come out, when we have 44 operators in Florida, that prices will come down. And already, as you pointed out, it's very accessible in Tallahassee. I mean, you don't have to drive very far, but there are places in Florida where you don't really have access. It's,
Yeah.
you have to drive. It's a schlep to get to a dispensary. So I think prices will come down and availability and access will increase. So that's that's the best I can give you.
Well, we got a session coming up in a couple of weeks. Let's just see how it all plays out, I suppose. If you like drama, go to the Florida channel. There's plenty of it there. In the meantime, if you want to get a chance to read any of Dara's works, who are you writing for right now?
I work for the News Service of Florida. We're a subscription service. And so we're a wire service. Your listeners can also subscribe to us, but we are almost all of the media outlets in Florida subscribe to us. And I'm also the host of my own podcast, Deeper Dive with Dara Cam, and you can find that on the City and State Florida website or on your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple.
Yeah, now a lot of people don't have access to news service because there is a bit of a paywall there, but you can always find Deeper Dive with Dara Cam.
You can.
Where you get all your best podcasts including the good ones about the murder investigations, which he doesn't do.
I don't. I'm sorry. I wish I did because I
That's
like to
okay.
listen.
Dara, we got another interview, and then we want to get to the Key West Day on time. So you
All
take care of
right.
that
Go
trip,
enjoy
and
your
we'll see you
fritter.
soon. All
Yeah,
right.
it's nice. Thanks for having me. Bye
All right.
bye.
Take care. Well, that's it for today over here in Tallahassee. We're going to go ahead and talk to a couple more senators. We're pushing more of our bills, and they're getting some traction. We just finished talking to Representative James Buchanan, who, by the way, says hi to Barry Gordon, who's in Panama City right now, because he really appreciates what they're doing over in Sarasota. And and he is actually interested in looking at the cultivation centers bill, which would allow a different kind of home grow that would allow people to access co-ops where they can grow their own product and cut costs that way. We'll see how things fly. In the meantime, this week on the rotation, a program note on the 26th, we have the one and only Afro Man. And with that, peace out. And I'm gonna hit the ground running over here and keep going till I stop. Take care. Stay well. Peace out.